Okay, wait, you're gonna have to explain that more to me,
Well, what happens is when he does these settlement agreements, he appoints an outside counsel, a law officer.
in what sort of instance? What's
Well, and Herb Stern was hired to prosecute, well, not to prosecute, but to look over the settlement agreement with the UMDMJ, rather than his office moving for a prosecution. He prosecuted Wayne Bryant.
Okay, but what was the nature of the
that they were
and there's
inappropriate use.
They're like a public board? Or?
Yes, they're a public entity, public-private entity. They had a lot of taxpayer dollars into their structure, and the issue was the misuse of those tax dollars. And rather than prosecute the university as an entity, Christie decided to get into a settlement agreement with them, which gave him the ability to hire somebody like a Herb Stern, who made millions of dollars, his firm did, from monitoring the settlement agreement. And there was a myriad of these. Some of the people, for example, Jim Quarter, he once ran for governor.
And that's taxpayer dollars that the guys paid.
That's right. Jim Quarter ran for governor of New Jersey a while back. He wound up in a business that was also subject to prosecution that Christie allowed off the hook to enter into a settlement agreement with. John Ashcroft was the most famous one. Okay. Ashcroft wound up with a multi-million-dollar contract. It was $50 million.
And that's a big Bush guy.
Not only a big Bush guy, but he was the Attorney General over Christie. Christie actually came in on his watch. He winds up, making a lot of money. That one thing wound up leading to reform in Congress. Christie was called before Congress on that issue, and when he explained the details of them, Congress put in place some reforms to allow more discretion or require much more discretion into these settlement agreements than existed prior to that.
Well, let's get back.
Well, there's one more important one. Another important one was an agreement he gave to a former prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. This was the U.S. attorney who decided not to charge his brother Todd in a stock fraud scheme of a company that Todd Christie worked for in New York. Ironically, everybody else in the case was prosecuted. Todd Christie was not prosecuted. A year or so later, after that U.S. attorney left his post, he wound up with a settlement agreement making substantial amount of money from Christie. And ironically, there's no surprise that many of these people who were given these agreements and worked and made a profit at taxpayers' dollars because of Christie wound up being significant contributors to his campaign for governor.
Okay, you mentioned the Bergen County Democrat, whose name escapes me, but I'm remembering this was sort of a vague standard that he was.
He was indicted on
not honest services.
Honest services mail fraud.
Okay, and he was later.
The charges were thrown out.
Yeah, it was
thrown out. It was such a vague standard.
Something similar happened to Sharp James.
Yes, but they threw out the mail fraud, the honest services mail fraud on Sharp James, but they maintained the extortion conviction, which he was also charged with. Sharp James is also one of the other key targetings that Christie had done, and all were done in sync, if you will, or close to.
It's not justice. It's incapacitating the people that can get out the vote against you when the time comes.
Well,
I mean, if they get cleared later, who cares?
That's the point. I mean, Bergen County, as it goes, you usually don't win the governor's election if you don't win Bergen County. So it's a key state, and in Hudson, we know that a Democrat has to really have a good turnout in Hudson in a close election in order to carry the statewide election.
All right. What can you tell us new about Solomon Dweck?
Well, new is new is what we might learn when we get the chance to put him on the stand, hopefully in an evidentiary hearing. We want to learn more about his deal with the government. I mean, most people don't know Dweck. He was arrested in a Ponzi scheme. What he was basically doing was he'd buy one property, mortgage it out 3 times or more, or put buyers together. They might put a 600,000 together for a property worth 300,000, and Dweck would pocket the 300, and then he would turn around, parcel that off, sell it off, and as his old investors wanted their money, Dweck would find another real estate deal and build up new investors, pay the old ones off, scam these guys, and it just kept perpetuating itself to the point that one day he had to come due with a $25 million note. Now, to show you how good Dweck is, he goes through a drive-up teller window in a bank, and convinces the teller to wire to the person he wants to send $25 million, $25 million of which is not in his account. And he says to them that, the money's due there, and so said it's okay, and do it.
Well, the way it was reported in the Jersey Sting, it wasn't just the teller. There was like an assistant bank manager.
Yeah, well, that goes up the line.
Right?
It goes up the line.
It was standing there and said, but he put in, it was a closed account, and he said they're going to open it back up, and he put in a deposit and convinced them to treat that as cash.
Now, and he did this sitting in his car, not even in the, not even in the bank, but that's what happened. And brazen enough, he goes back the next day and tries to get another 25 million, and that's when the bank called, the FBI, and the FBI arrests Solomon Dweck. And there's varying versions of what I'm going to tell you now. There's a version in the Jersey Sting, and there's a version of Solomon Dweck testifying in the trial of...
Okay, but wait a second. Solomon Dweck, I saw him in court. He's a very weird-looking individual. And when I say that, I mean he sits there and makes faces. He looks like somebody from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He'll make fish faces. He just can't... how could you sit across from him at the diner?
Well, first of all, when we get to there, I didn't know who he was. Until you're sitting across from the individual, and I still don't know he's Solomon Dweck. But let me just back up a bit. He's arrested, and this is a key point which comes out later. There's 2 versions, like I said, the Jersey Sting version, and then there's the version Solomon Dweck told about what happened after his arrest on the stand. I think you have to look at what he said on the stand, because the government never corrected what he said if it was false. What he said is that immediately after his arrest, his father was trying to reach out to political connections he had, mainly a guy, Larry Bathgate, who's a prominent Republican financier of elections in New Jersey, to get him help, because Dweck had been a donor of $50,000 to George Bush's campaigns. Okay, remember now who was heading the finance effort for George Bush. Okay,
that's right.
You had Christie and Palatucci. So they were looking for help for Dweck. Now you got to realize something. The President of the United States is not going to exonerate someone who just ripped the bank off for $50 million, aside from all these other things they were finding out, these other crimes that they were finding out, the Ponzi scheme that was involved. But with influence, Dweck got the next best thing, and that was a role in, a confidential informant who could work off what was going to be a lot of time by being used in a sting. And the person who authorized that, and the person who selected where Dweck was going to wind up going, was Christopher Christie.